Hello, beautiful souls. This is Atul Krishna Das once again as your host here in another occasion for Ashram Talks. Today, we continue exploring a little bit more about Karma Yoga. And today, there's something that I had felt very identified with lately, and is the idea that you have spiritual goals, you want to accomplish something, but at the same time, in the day to day, you may feel like the karma and everything that you have done in your past has influenced you some way or another. And you're feeling like, I'm not doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, or I feel like I could be doing even more. And sometimes we judge ourselves in our own path. So today we have a little bit of wisdom from Krishna about those situations and how not to be so harsh with ourselves while at the same time keeping with our path. And to talk a little bit more about that today, we have the wonderful Krsnachandra Das with us. Hare
Thank you.
Krishna, Krishna Chandra.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the very, very kind introduction. I really appreciate it. So, I would like to start with a prayer before we talk about the verse. I will just get started. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Patakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Dehivam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantarata Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindaye Tulasi Devi I Priyavai Keshavascha Krishna Bhakti Pradidevi Satyavatya Namo Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebho vaishnavebho namo namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gora Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tonight we will talk about Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 33. Sadrisham Chittate Svayaha Prakriter Jnanavanapi Prakritim Yanti Bhutani Nigrahaha Kim Karishyati. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature. What can repression accomplish? I'm very pleased to begin the first of a three-part series of talks. Tonight I will speak about Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 33. Thursday I'll speak about verse 34 in a talk entitled The Mechanism of Material Bondage, Attraction, and Aversion. 1 week from now I'll talk about verse 35, and that will be called living one's dharma courageously. If you've ever wondered why you repeat patterns even when you know better, Krishna addresses this directly in verse 33. Many of us raised in an Abrahamic faith can grasp the concept of the soul having no end. But the soul having no beginning is a concept that can be bewildering at first. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 12, Krishna says, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all of these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be." Chapter 2, verse 22 explains that as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly, the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Krishna goes on in the next verse, 13, as the soul, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. The key phrase here is self realized soul. The vast majority of us are not yet self realized. Many of us do not understand the nature of the material world, the true nature, while those of us just learning are still under the influence of the material nature to varying degrees. Chapter 3, verse 27 explains that the bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities, which are in actuality carried out by nature. Chapter 13, verse 22 further explains that the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. For a moment, try to comprehend infinity. It's quite bewildering. Now, try to comprehend that we existed without a beginning. As our souls are bound in samsara, the endless cycle of birth and death, we acquire impressions on our souls called samskars. Karma earned by past deeds is called prarabdha karma. The nature of these impressions can vary. If we have done good deeds, these impressions can lead to a beautiful and pleasurable experience in our subsequent lifetime. If we have done bad deeds, they can lead to bad and unpleasant experiences. This is the nature of karma. Every action carries a reaction. That is the justice of the universe. Through negative karma, or experiences derived from past misdeeds, we suffer through varying degrees of grief and poverty. It becomes increasingly difficult to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, as many are fond of saying, when we become so enmeshed in our own pain and suffering. It can have a paralyzing effect on our bodies, minds, and spirits. Being the benefactor of positive karma is a much more pleasant experience in contrast. Doing good deeds in one's past life can lead to being the benefactor of generational wealth, being good looking, having good health, and having good luck in general. Positive karma sounds great, and of course, it even feels great. The problem with positive karma is that it ultimately keeps us feeling happy and content while locked up in a gilded cage. We may have the things we want: money, good health, uh, the ability to have beautiful and charming partners in life, but this material world is ultimately a jail, one which our lives always end in death. And we can't take anything with us, only impressions. Suffering, as well as good fortune, is all temporary, like passing seasons. And that too is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 14. O son of Kunti, the non permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arrive from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Krishna didn't tell us to only tolerate distress without being disturbed. Krishna was referring to both distress and happiness, to tolerate both. Because distress and happiness in this material world act together in tandem, like a tag team, like good cop and bad cop, as they say in detective dramas. They're both two sides of the same coin. One keeps us too paralyzed and hopeless to act, while the other one keeps us content and fattens us up for our eventual demise. An acquaintance of mine once told me that he had a friend who was sentenced to jail for a very long time. He had gone to visit his friend in prison. His inmate friend seemed unusually happy, and when he asked why, his inmate friend replied that he had made good friends with the prison warden, and the warden had given him some fruit to eat. And to us, that seems like a silly reason to be happy, since we as free people can go to the grocery store and buy any kind of food we want, or even pick the fruit off a tree. But in the prisoner's reality, he was limited to the prison cafeteria where food was not available, such fruit, etc., good food. The warden gave the prisoner something so paltry, but great happiness resulted. And similarly, even being given hundreds of millions of dollars in this material world, it's actually tantamount to a prison warden giving the inmates some fruit to eat. From our point of view, hundreds of millions of dollars, it's so amazing. We could buy mansions all over the world, cars, planes, investments, never have to work again. At least not until we die in this body and are given another body. Then our work days will resume. Krishna isn't just condemning happiness in the material world, he's just revealing its limitations. The spiritual world is incomparable to the material world. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, also known as the Bhagavad Purana, Canto 10, Chapter 14, verse 11 explains that there are countless universes, and within each one, innumerable Brahmas. Now imagine limitless, innumerable universes. Contemplate the vastness of our galaxy being a pinprick within our universe. And then imagine that there are infinite versions of that. It's quite mind blowing. But let's also consider what it says in the Purusha Sukta or Rig Veda 1093. One quarter of reality, or pada, becomes the material manifestation. Three quarters, tripad, remain eternal in the spiritual world. Think about The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy was in Kansas and our perspective was drab black and white. This is a classic movie from the 1930s. When Dorothy went to Oz, our perspective became colorized and beautiful. Now, even that example doesn't go anywhere near to explain the contrast between the material and the spiritual worlds. Krishna describes the spiritual world in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 6. That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or the moon, nor by electricity. One who reaches it never returns to the spiritual world. Excuse me, one who reaches it never returns to this material world. Brahma Samhita 29, excuse me, Brahma Samhita chapter 5 verse 29 further describes, I worship Govinda, the primeval lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or gopis. Even though the material creation appears innumerably vast, containing limitless universes breathed out by Mahavishnu, the scriptures describe it as only a single corner of reality. The greater part of existence is the spiritual sky, where life is eternal, conscious, and blissful. It's where Krishna and Srimati Radharani are becoming increasingly more and more beautiful. Now, how do we move from the material to the spiritual world? There's another type of samskar, and that is accrued via sukriti, or pious credits. It is achieved through acts of devotion to the divine, to Krishna. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 40 that in this endeavor there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Now, this can include activity in Krishna consciousness or acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification. These activities can include traditional devotional activities such as japa or kirtan or reading spiritual literature, as well as not being attached to one duties and dedicating those results to Krishna. Unlike karma, Sukriti does not burn out. It's eternal. It's not finite like karma. Any endeavor we make for Krishna will always be remembered by him. If we get knocked down on this path, all we have to do is get back up. There will be no loss. And once we realize our eternal personal relationship with Krishna, we will break the bonds which keep us tethered to the modes of material nature. They will no longer have any pull in our heart. In the 1999 film The Matrix, when trying to understand how to fight the illusory nature of the world in that film, Neo asks Morpheus, what are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets? To which Morpheus replied, no, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to. I'm not trying to tell you that self realized souls become like Superman, but they enjoy complete freedom from influence of the material energy. Consider the history of the famous devotee Namacharya Haridas Thakur. He lived in West Bengal in the early 1500s. He happily chanted the holy names of Krishna, and as a consequence, he was punished severely by the local government. He was beaten in 22 marketplaces because he would not stop chanting the holy names of Krishna. Throughout the whole experience of being beaten, he continued to chant. He actually felt very sorry for the people beating him and prayed for their forgiveness. He survived in a time when people just had no idea he would. He was protected by the holy name. And then people wanted to ruin his reputation. They sent a beautiful prostitute to tempt him from his detachment from the material energy. and his attachment to Krishna and his holy name. However, it was his dedication and purity from the material energy that enabled him to make that prostitute his own disciple in chanting the holy name. He actually helped free her from the influence of the material energy. And then he was later tested by Maya Devi herself, the mistress of the material energy. Haridas Thakur was completely divested from material energy. He was just completely immune from it. And as a result, he was able to bless Maya Devi with with his chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And that's what it means to get to the point of not even having to dodge proverbial bullets in this material world. So, how do we become a person of knowledge according to this verse and act according to our true nature? The key lies in recognizing the feudal pattern of the material world. And that pattern is samsara, and it can potentially last literally for eternity. I believe that becoming a person of knowledge or self realized soul is a two-step process. First, we can understand the eternal nature of Krishna and the spiritual world and the temporary feudal nature of the material world on an academic level or on some base level. We can read books, we can hear from devotees, and we feel it strongly resonates with us. And that's right when the spark of shraddha or faith begins. We become very enthusiastic and dedicate our time to reading the scriptures, chanting japa and kirtan, doing seva for Krishna. But it's still a process that takes time. We may see there are devotees in our community who have become monks. And I've seen that there is pressure from young devotees to imitate this mood, to wear saffron cloth and dedicate themselves to become lifelong monks. And that's not a mood that can be imitated. In his book called Jaiva Dharma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that renunciation is not external. Real renunciation awakens naturally when attachment to Krishna arises in the heart. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 59 says that the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Sometimes we sincerely want to change. We know something about our life is not aligned. Maybe our habits, our reactions, our attachments. And so we try harder. We push ourselves. We suppress. We think that if we apply just enough force within ourselves, we will become spiritual. But many of us quietly discover that the harder we squeeze, the more resistance we feel inside. And at some point, we may even wonder, why am I still like this? Krishna's words in verse 33 are deeply compassionate. He's not condemning us for having a nature. He's explaining that the transformation does not come through force or repression against ourselves. Spiritual life is not about pretending to be someone else. It's about allowing our true nature to gradually awaken. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature. What can repression accomplish? That's the verse we're studying. And I find there are two kinds of repression. The first is when we're completely ignorant souls who don't understand the source of true happiness. Like that inmate who forgot what it was like to live in a world abundant with fruit. And then we become bound to the false currency that exists in these material universes, and we fail to realize that we can't take any of these material things with us to our next life. The second type of repression is when we become spiritual aspirants and we feel this need to imitate, with a complete lack of foundation, the mood and dress of renunciates. When we try to follow a path of artificial renunciation, our effort at renunciation cannot be sustained unless we have the foundation of the higher taste. For example, the joy of having millions of dollars and living in a mansion in the material world may be sweet, but living with Krishna and his associates in the spiritual world is far sweeter. Through spiritual practice and the mercy of Krishna and our spiritual teachers or gurus, we draw closer to complete detachment from this material energy. At some point in life, most of us experience a time or a season where our external world, it doesn't match what we thought it would be. And in those moments, our deeper impressions, our samskars, they begin to reveal themselves. Throughout my life, I experienced various traumas. My family broke apart. Our once very lucrative family business was completely taken away. My mother died after a long illness, and she died relatively young. And then something else unpleasant happened. Not as horrible in the greater sense, but it was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. And after being just so resilient and in survival mode for decades, I just withdrew for a few weeks. I started to binge watch some show on streaming networks about horseback riding in the countryside just because it was a pleasant diversion or escapism. But fortunately, before the bulk of these unfortunate events that occurred, I had spent several months out of 3 years of my youth traveling with my guru or spiritual teacher. And these impressions or some scars strongly came back to me in great strength, as if my immune system had suddenly remembered how to fight off a nasty virus. I stopped watching my show. I started chanting japa again attentively. I started to read scripture. I joined a local yoga community where I helped lead kirtan. And now in that community, I lead a study group where we read and discuss such scriptures as the Bhagavad Gita and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I found that by serving that community, which became my own community, I've not only been teaching others, but I've been learning through teaching and making close friendships that are based on our mutual desires for spiritual fulfillment. And these weren't even aspirations for service or seva that I had for a while, but they fell into place and it felt right and it continues to feel right. Krishna doesn't ask us to be someone else. He teaches us how the eternal self gradually awakens beneath everything we once thought we were. I mean, I never thought that I would become a speaker of any kind. First, it was manifested through leading a study group in the yoga community, and then it was through the opportunity to speak about Bhagavad Gita verses on Ashram Talks English. And that was a very pleasant surprise. That was something I did not know about myself. And that's the point, that's Krishna's point in this verse. Nature moves us, but our nature can also be purified, and then we can understand ourselves a little better and our relationship with Krishna. The unhappy memories of unpleasant things that happened in my life remain, but now I can see them for what they are with greater clarity. It's like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons, just like Krishna told us in chapter 2, verse 14. And all our journeys are different, but they ultimately converge upon each of us discovering our true nature as an eternal soul with an eternal relationship with Krishna. And each of our relationships with Krishna are completely unique due to our distinct eternal identity. As we ride on this journey, Krishna is patient and understanding. And as we take one step toward him, he takes 10 steps toward us. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Krsnachandra. It is wonderful to have this reflection. And definitely for me, it's very helpful that
Good.
we have to be kind not only with others, but
Yes,
also with ourselves and
absolutely.
with our own path.
Right. Hmm. Yes, I think that being kind to ourselves, that's something that helps us in both our material life and our spiritual life. Um, we do not get there by beating ourselves up. And that's beating ourselves up, that's another form of repression, ultimately. It's like, and we think about it in these terms, like, if we have like a horse or a dog, we're not going to whip that horse or a
Mhm.
dog. We're going to be kind. That's really our inclination, the inclination of most people. So why would we do that to ourselves?
Yes, and I think it's important to think that this is not like an excuse to let things go,
Right.
but it's more like acknowledge that, okay, I'm not going on the way that I want to go.
Right.
Um, Everybody can have faults.
Yeah.
Uh, let's pray, let's do japa, let's look
Right.
for Krishna,
Mhm.
and let's do it full of love. And I
Exactly.
think that's at the end of the day a way for make it more sustainable. Um,
Yes. That's good. I love that you're thinking that way. That's fantastic. I think what we need to do, and I've said this before other times that I've talked, that we need to kind of anytime we get discouraged, because like when we let ourselves go, even spiritually, that's something we do in life. Sometimes we become discouraged. That's mainly why it happens. So we have to, first of all, be kind to ourselves, then we can't beat ourselves up. But we also have to recenter ourselves, and we have to rediscover like what it is that either drew us here in the first place, or we kind of see, like, what do I really love about this whole spiritual process? We can, and I think it's just by listening to ourselves, we know what that is, and we can find out, and we draw ourselves there, and that's the spark we need to like restart the fire.
Thank you so much.
Well,
And thank you everybody who was able to be here live. And I would love to hear from some people also in the comments about perhaps some experiences that they have, like in a moment in their life and what was helpful in that moment to remind ourselves about how to continue in this path and how to do it kindly. So perhaps we can help inspire each other and using this platform also to have association with other Vaishnavas, even if we feel that we are isolated and we cannot do it in person
right.
because of whatever reason in our personal lives. Thank you so much, Krishna Chandra.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.